Guys, welcome back. It is Racer X, and I am back with my good buddies here at the Hurst Autoplex, obviously in Hurst, Texas, which is on the northeast side of Fort Worth. And I want to show you guys some cars. I want to compare some cars for you that I think it's just a really, really interesting comparison. If you're the kind of person that's looking for just a bad mamma jamma of a sports car, I'm going to compare three of the baddest that are out there right now, and I'll let you guys decide what you think is actually the best one, and I will give you as many facts as I can to make an informed decision. It should be fun. Also, guys, if you are new to the channel, make sure you slap subscribe. You can find that down here in the corner. Here we go. We got the 1,000 horsepower Hellcat. One of the more interesting vehicles they have here. And keep in mind, these guys carry all sorts of performance-oriented vehicles. As you can see, this is actually a wide-body red-eye Challenger, and it is gold. And that is definitely interesting. So gold wheels, gold wrap, about as gold as it gets. And definitely an interesting look. Of course, they got a beautiful ZL1 inside the showroom. They've got some C8s. They've got a Shelby GT500 in there. You've got all sorts of good stuff. So let's go over and take a look at the cars that I wanted to show you. So here is the lineup. I've got some of the baddest Chevys they've got. Of course, you've got the Camaro ZL1. That is a supercharged car. And of course, you've got your Challenger Hellcat right here. And you can't miss this one. This is the brand new C8 Corvette. All of these things are awesome in their own right for very different reasons. I want to walk through some of the specs on some of these. I'm going to drive these around a little bit, and I definitely want to give you my thoughts on which one is the better car. Well, first off, I want to cover sort of the elephant in the room, so to speak. A lot of people have compared the Hellcat to the ZL1. And yes, the ZL1 is lighter than the Hellcat. The Hellcat makes more power. These two bruisers kind of have gone back and forth for many years now in terms of which one is better and why. And then this guy is obviously the new soldier to the mix here. This thing could not be more different. We're talking about a mid-engine car. This one is naturally aspirated, unlike the other two. 495 horsepower with the Z51 package, and that's actually what this one has. I'll walk around it a little bit for you. But this thing punches well above its weight. And I wanted to just kind of compare these three because when you're talking about like a sticker price perspective, right? Basically anything from like the mid 70s to the mid 80s, I wanted to kind of get that in there. And that's kind of where these sit for the most part. So first, let's talk about Chevy's ZL1 Camaro. This actually shares the engine out of the Z06. And as you can see, this is a very angular looking vehicle. The hood is very aggressive looking there. Actually, functional heat extraction there. And as you can see from the front, look at the menacing grille on the ZL1. It is a pretty striking car. I mean, it just looks a lot different than your standard Camaro. You can see it's actually got a much more aggressive look down the side. You've got the front splitter here. I mean, it's just an aggressive, nice looking vehicle, and nothing changes when you go to the inside. You can see the wheels here, very aggressive. You've got nittos on here, and these things actually have some width to them. These are 305s that come stock here. And then right in here, check out the interior. It's actually beautiful in here. You can see it's got that red and black theme in here, really sharp. Now this one features the 10-speed auto, which is actually fantastic. And it's a great place to sit, flat bottom steering wheel. You've got that central infotainment center here. And the dash is actually quite nice with sort of that suede there in the middle. It is a very new age looking car in here. So it's very sharp. The back seats are small, but they're there. So something to think about. And of course, here is the rock star of the ZL1 Camaro. That is your supercharged LT4. 650 horse, 650 pound-feet of torque, and it's a pretty light vehicle when you compare it to this bad boy over here, the Hellcat. And that's actually where I'm headed. Let's talk a little bit about the Hellcat now. So we have the Challenger Hellcat. This bad boy, these things have been out since 2015. This particular one is actually not the 2020, so this one's actually 707. The newer ones come out with 717, have a little bit different hood on them, but they're going to drive essentially identical to this. As you can see, this has the nice wide wheels on it, and this is an automatic car. This is an 8-speed automatic versus the 10-speed like you find in this one. And once again, this thing has really made a presence on the road. You know, when you hear the word Hellcat, that comes with the connotation of, look, big horsepower, fast, muscle car, and this thing really does fit the bill. Let's take a real quick look at the inside of the Challenger Hellcat. There you go. This one is actually equipped with the black leather. You can see on all the Challengers, the center actually wraps around towards the driver there. So it's very driver centric. You can see the auto. It actually smells great in here, guys. I actually, big fan of these. So anyway, as you guys know, it has sort of a flat bottom here, leather wrapped steering wheel. I do like the carbon fiber trim that you get on the Hellcats. And the back seat in this one is actually just a little bit bigger than it is in the Camaro. So something to think about there. Once again, that's central entertainment center there, or infotainment center as they like to call it, is actually very functional and works quite well. So everything is kind of right where you want it in the Hellcat. And of course, there is the rock star in the Hellcat. It's that supercharged 6.2 liter Hemi, and this is a 2.4 liter blower, IHI blower, and it's pretty efficient blower, works quite well. And this one actually 650 pound-feet of torque, just like in the Camaro right next to it. And said this one's a little bit heavier when it comes to weight. I think this one's somewhere around 4,500 pounds. But anyway, this is a nice driving vehicle. You've got dynamic drive modes in this. So fantastic car. And now jumping over to sort of the alien of the bunch. Yes, I know, this is a true traditional sports car, and for Corvette, it's everything about this thing is pretty much brand new chassis. As I will show you here, the engine now sits in, they call it a mid-engine. Of course, it is a rear engine. There it is, right in the back there. This one actually features the high wing on it. This has got the Z51 package. It's very sharp. This one has the upgraded wheels on it, and the interior of this car is beautiful. But one of the most striking things about this car is look at the vents on the side. You don't really notice it in pictures quite as much as you do in person, but check that out. That thing is very aggressive and almost has a little bit of a European flair to it, and that's kind of, I think, what they were going for here. But very light car when compared to the others. Of course, no back seat in this. It's only a two-seater, but from a price point perspective, even though it's less power at $495, this thing, as I mentioned, does punch well above its weight, and it has a dual clutch in it, so a DCT, and that thing is very efficient at putting the power down. So this thing on the street, I've seen people actually running like 2.8 seconds. That is pretty impressive. Let's take a quick look at the inside of the Corvette. Look at that. Pretty striking. This one obviously is equipped with the blue and black interior. You can see flat bottom and flat top on the steering wheel here. Actually looks pretty darn cool with this blue in here. Very driver centric in this car. It is a cockpit in this thing. I'll talk to you more about that in just a minute. Smells lovely in here, by the way. This is a gorgeous car. And yeah, this thing is just bad to the bone. So here is actually the cockpit of the ZL1. Just wanted to kind of show you this. As I mentioned, you can see the sills they do sit up quite high. And of course the dash sits up fairly high, but the gauges are beautiful in this car. You know, it's nicely appointed in here. You can see it's got the central infotainment screen there. You can do a lot of things from there. Really all the controls, your paddle shifters, everything right there, centrally located. You got your drive mode selector. Of course, this is a 10-speed auto here, but you've got your climate controls here. You've got that suede on the dashboard, and a quick look over at the passenger seat. It is a very nice interior in this vehicle. Okay, I'm actually aboard the ZL1 Camaro, and I have to admit that driving this particular car is very, very different than most of the other cars that I drive. And the reason I say that is because the sills sit up very, very high. I mentioned that on really all the Camaros. It's just sort of the way they're designed. The dash in front of you sits quite high. So if you're not used to that, it does take some getting used to. But I will say this engine has a lot of bark. And while the blower may not necessarily be as big as the Hellcat's blower, it's also very efficient, so you don't really notice it. So it feels like there's a lot of power on tap when you drive this car. And I have to mention that the seats in this, they're really sharp. I love black and red, as you guys know. And these are black and red appointed seats. You've got red stitching throughout. It's got like suede on the steering wheel and on the dash. It's got a nice fit and finish on the inside of this thing, so it's actually quite pleasant. When I look at the gauges, it is a little different because you've got the different air conditioning vents here. You've got four of them, and they're big and they're circular, and it's just different. It's a modern looking vehicle on the inside, and it looks very angular, like a spaceship. From the outside, it just looks angry, which I actually kind of like. So this is a 6.2 liter supercharged engine, of course, and even though it shares the exact same engine really with the Z06, driving this car does feel quite a bit different than it does driving the C7 Z06, and of course the C8 is a completely different animal altogether. But I have to say, the car is bigger and it does feel a little bit different to drive this, but listen to it. It sounds fantastic. Oh yeah. And she's trying to get the tires loose already. So the torque is all right there. The power comes on pretty linear in this car. It doesn't feel like it's trying to get away from you at all. It doesn't feel out of control or like it's trying to kill you. But it does feel like it's got quite a bit of power, and it definitely doesn't feel like you have to search for the power in the car. Yeah, you got to dig into the pedal a little bit. That's pretty typical with supercharged cars, but the power seems to be on tap pretty readily. I also want to mention one thing I do really like about the Chevys is the fact that they have the heads-up display. I have owned Corvettes in the past, and I've always really liked that hologram that shoots up right in front of you that tells you, how fast you're going. You don't even have to take your eyes off the road. It's a pretty neat feature. But yeah, it's just a really comfortable place to sit. This is a car that you could easily daily all the time. On turn-in, it doesn't feel super responsive, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's lagging either. So it's got a really nice kind of, it's not overly heavy, but at the same time, it's got enough steering weight to feel like you're very in control. So it's a very balanced car. This car does have a nice button-down feel to it. If I could pick one of these to every day, I think this would be a pretty good option. It feels kind of like an SS on steroids. The power's linear in this. You can't hear the blower quite as much as you do in the Hellcat, but you can definitely tell it's in there and it's doing its thing. And altogether, it, like I said, it has a really nice, powerful, linear torque curve to it, and it's a very pleasant car to drive. I feel like I've got enough room in it. The seats they're hugging me, but they feel fantastic. So no big complaints with the ZL1. It kind of has that middle of the road, not super aggressive feel. Listen to this. Yeah. Sorry guys, but it doesn't feel overly aggressive, but at the same time, it feels like it's got all the power you would want. So really nice package in the ZL1. So here is the cockpit of the C8 Corvette, and man, what a difference. Everything is just really right there when it comes to with an arm's length. You can see it's got this big, beautiful infotainment center that faces the driver right here. Your drive mode selectors. This is actually a handrest here. But this thing has all the climate controls kind of right over here. Here's a quick look at the passenger seat. And of course, that engine is sitting behind me. There's the Rockstar sitting right back there, 6.2 naturally aspirated V8. And a really quick look over at this side. I do like sort of the brushed nickel. This has the Bose system in it, and you got your paddle shifters here. Very nicely appointed interior, and what a different feel, because obviously with the engine being behind you, you're being pushed instead of pulled. Go figure. I am now aboard the C8 Corvette, and this is actually the first time I've had the opportunity to drive the C8. I did have one of these on order, as some of you guys were aware, and then of course with the COVID thing, it didn't end up working out. Moved my deposit actually over to a C8 Z06, but I have to tell you, it is a striking car on the inside, just like it is on the outside. And this thing is an 8-speed dual clutch transmission. It's pretty advanced, and at the end of the day, this thing feels so different than driving the other two. It feels very much like a cockpit. It's very driver-centric in here. The gauges on this car, absolutely fantastic, by the way. And I have to admit, I'm a big fan of it. I kind of want to see how the acceleration goes in this thing. But I will say, it is such, you almost feel like you're wearing this car when you're driving it, because you do sit very low to the ground, but visibility is fantastic in this car. The dash actually sits really down low here, as you might have seen when I showed you what the cockpit looked like. And it is just a really neat, almost a space age type interior. You kind of feel a little bit closed off from the passenger, which isn't always a bad thing if you like that cockpit feel. This thing is fantastic, and actually has a little bit of headroom in it, believe it or not. You wouldn't think so by looking at it, but man, the gauges in this thing are fantastic. I've got the heads-up display working here in front of me. I'm driving this car in sport mode, and I'm pretty impressed with it so far. So as I drive this car around and I start to do kind of some of the turn-in on this thing, man, is it responsive. I have to admit, yes, it has the Z51 package on this car, and that does help a little bit. But I have to admit, man, it is so quick to turn in on this thing. And because the steering wheel is just right here, it literally almost feels like the car knows what you're thinking. I don't know how else to describe it, but the responsiveness is very, very quick. So here we come off the line a little bit. I just want to give it just a little bit. And wow, see, it just, there's no fanfare to it at all. Sounds fantastic, by the way, but you know, it just goes. There's no tire spin, there's no shredding and just wildness and crazy. It just no nonsense, just books. And there's something to be said for that, because you know, it's got all this technology working for it, and man, I've got to tell you, it makes for a pretty neat driving experience. So as I sit here trying to compare this thing to the ZL1 Camaro and the Hellcat, man, it is so difficult because they're so darn different. I mean, this one sits low to the ground. Visibility, I mean, you can almost see, it's almost like looking at your toes. It's crazy. You almost look like you're looking down over the hood. Of course, it does have a trunk, or some people call it a frunk, in front of you. It's just, this is, you know, one of those cars that just kind of freaks you out a little bit, because it feels way, way faster than 495 horsepower should. It must be just all that technology, the dual clutch, whatever it is. But as I mentioned before, this thing does punch well above its weight, and there's not a lot of loss. I mean, look, wow, look at it go. And it doesn't even feel like the car's really trying. I can't believe this car has under 500 horsepower, because it most definitely does not feel like it. Yeah, the car weighs like 34, close to 3,500 pounds, but it feels really light on its toes when you drive it. So from an ergonomics perspective, you could literally daily this thing. I mean, it's very comfortable to drive. The seats are very bolstered and kind of slightly on the aggressive side, which I actually like, but it's doing a great job of holding me in place, and they're beautiful. Of course, you can get these things appointed with red or black, or there's a number of different ways that you can set these things up. You can go all the way up to like a 3LT, I think they call it, in terms of trim level. There's, you know, lots of trim levels in this. But at the end of the day, the instrumentation in it is fantastic. If you don't like a very cockpit type feel, this vehicle probably will not be for you, but it's almost like driving a street jet, because everything is just so right here. I can literally just rest my arms, and everything is just right here where I want it, in just one little touch. And I think that is pretty darn cool. It looks very space age across the dash, and it does a lot of things really well, this C8 Corvette. Now, I didn't jump into some of the other things that this thing can do, and it can do quite a lot. It actually has settings where it can remember and actually lift the car. It has My Mode, it has Z Mode. These are all configurable settings that you can put in your Corvette. So from a technology perspective, this thing does a lot of things that are great for the driver. So yeah, I mean, it's a really nice driving car, and I tell you what, I mean, you could literally rock this thing on a daily basis. I wouldn't necessarily say in snow or anything like that, but as long as the weather's great, this thing would be very comfortable to take out and just drive. It just seems funny for me to even say it. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I really like this. As you guys know, I've owned Corvettes in the past. It is so different feeling, this car. And when you're talking to somebody who owns a 1,000 horsepower car, and this is half of that, but it just feels so capable, and it's just so much fun to drive. Okay, so my final thoughts on the C8. It's a fantastic driving car. The power comes on very linear. I'm actually a huge fan. It's very, very responsive on the road. It looks good. I love the cockpit feel in it. I am a big fan of this thing. Like I said, I mean, it seems like you would be like, oh, you know, it just doesn't have enough horsepower, but it certainly doesn't feel like it when you drive it. It feels like it's got plenty of horsepower when you're driving it. Power is very linear and predictable in this. And there's something about hearing that engine behind you that's, it's just cool. I don't know what else to say about it. Now here is the inside of the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, and you can see I actually really do like the red gauges that come in this vehicle. You can see you've got your paddle shifters here, driver-centric in the fact that the dash does wrap around you, a little bit like the Corvette, not quite as aggressive as that, but I do like the carbon fiber trim that comes in this car. The seats are big and comfortable in the Hellcat. I will mention that if you're a bigger guy, the Hellcat is a very comfortable car. It does have back seats, of course, as we mentioned, the Corvette obviously does not, and the ZL1 seats are a little bit smaller than that, but the hood on this, man, you can really see the hood really sticks out on this vehicle, so it does take a little bit of getting used to if you're not used to that. There's a lot of engine under the hood, and of course, you know, you've got your door sills here, you've got your window controls and so forth and so on, but a nice driving position in the Challenger Hellcat. I am now aboard the Challenger Hellcat. Of course, a very familiar place for me to sit, already owning a Hellcat. Of course, mine's a Charger, but of course, I own a Challenger Scat Pack as well. And I've got to mention, you know, when we're comparing it to the other cars, the Corvette and the ZL1, it really feels quite different. Of course, this is really the only true muscle car of the bunch. Sorry, I'm trying to turn this corner here. And but it is a Oh, it is a torque beast. And so as you come off the line in this, the power is not quite as linear as it is in really either of the other two Chevys. This thing, you kind of start tipping in, and all of a sudden, just gobs of power come on at once, and this thing gets down to business. I will say the Hellcat, when you're driving it around on the street, it feels like you could literally just blow the tires off of it whenever you want, and you pretty much can, especially if you're running street tires. So definitely something to think about there, but it does retain a lot of that muscle car look and feel that a lot of people, a lot of Mopar people especially, really love. I mean, I love the way that it's appointed on the inside. You know, it doesn't feel anything like the Corvette at all. First of all, the car just feels way bigger, and it is. You've got way more hood sticking out in front of you. Of course, all that V8 power is coming from in front of you, and the same with the ZL1. The hood in this is obviously longer than it is in the ZL1. Both cars are aggressive when you compare the Hellcat to the ZL1, but I will show you, I mean, when you go to come off the line, which I'm getting ready to do right now, this is sport mode, and yo, there goes the tires. So when this thing decides, I mean, the torque is just so immediate on the Hellcat, and that's part of what makes it fun, and that's kind of what a muscle car should do. You should have all that torque and low end, just beefy grunt down on underneath the power band, really, right? Low in the RPM range, and this thing does do that quite well. So when I go to turn in on the Hellcat, yeah, the steering feels it feels a little slower. You can feel this car does have more body roll. This car is the heaviest of the three, especially when you talk about the Corvette. It's way heavier than the Corvette. But, you know, a lot of people feel like, you know what, that's the way a muscle car should be. You know, it's okay that it's heavy because sometimes that improves the ride quality. And when we talk about ride quality in this, I will mention that this thing drives absolutely fantastic. This is a very comfortable car to ride in. It's a very comfortable car to sit in, and it does a lot of things well. Now, if you're the kind of person that has to drive in inclement weather, once again, this probably would not be your best choice. This thing just has a gob of torque when you want to hit it. For example, but it makes you smile ear to ear, and that's what the Hellcat is all about. That's what it's been about since it's come out. And you know, it's a big horsepower number, big weight, just kind of in your face muscle car, and there's something to be said for that. There's a cool factor to that. Sorry about the sun here, guys. I do want to just kind of point this out, and I know earlier I mentioned the blower in this car is very pronounced and it makes a fantastic sound. So listen to this. Oh, it sounds so good. Oh, man. Okay, so my final thoughts on the Challenger Hellcat. Once again, it's a blast to drive. I love it. It's got that old school muscle retro look to it. Tons of power down low. You know, even though the car is heavier, it never feels like it's short on power. It puts a huge smile on your face, and you know, it's just a really fun vehicle to drive. Well, guys, that wraps it up. I've driven all three, so I want to kind of give you just my thoughts on these three, just kind of parting thoughts. So when we talk about the ZL1 Camaro, well, it's a well-rounded vehicle. It definitely doesn't feel like it's short on power. The power comes on very linear in that car. It does take a little bit of getting used to from a visibility perspective, as I mentioned on all the Camaros, but it's a nice driving car. I mean, it has some hints of aggression. Certainly it's an aggressive looking car from the front, most definitely, and it sets itself apart from the other Camaros out there. And that blower is just the right amount. I mean, it's not crazy, it's not a huge blower, but it's very efficient and it works well for that platform. And I do enjoy driving the ZL1. They jump over to the C8. First time driving the C8, guys, and I really enjoyed it. It is like wearing that car. I mean, the car just wraps around you in every sense of the word. And when you drive it, it feels so much more powerful than 500 horsepower. And there's no fanfare. When you go to accelerate, it's not like the other two where you can feel the spinning and you're fighting it. The car just goes. And there's something about having that engine behind you that's just different and kind of cool. The car is very striking. It's neat looking. And I have no complaints about the C8. I heavily enjoyed driving that vehicle. And then, of course, there's my beloved Hellcat. And of course, that thing is just a brute. That's what that car is. It's a big, heavy, just monster with a ton of torque and a loud blower, and it puts a huge smile on your face. It retains a lot of that retro styling from way back in the day. and there's something to be said for that as well. So all three of these cars are very, very cool in their own right. They're very different. It really just depends on kind of your personal preference, because you really can't go wrong with any of them. All three of these will put a gigantic smile on your face, and they're all lots of fun to drive. So at the end of the day, guys, you kind of have to drive all of them to make your own decision. And you know what? I would rock all three if it was up to me. So anyway, guys, it's been a fun one. I really appreciate you sticking in there with me. Huge shout out to the guys at Hurst Autoplex for allowing me to review these vehicles. Those guys are fantastic to deal with. I will catch you guys on the next one. So until then, Racer X.